The board has already met in executive session and we saluted the flag at that time. Mr. McLaughlin, if we could please have a roll call at this time.
Ms. Beckman?
Oh, sorry. I have to hit admit, and then she'll say yes.
Okay. I'll come back. Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. Korn?
Here.
Ms. Beckman?
Yes, here, sorry.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mr. Markarian?
Here.
Mr. Syed?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. And welcome, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. Notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk. And a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending its normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting a virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted on the district website, www.bernardsboe.com. These same directions were posted at our intended but unavailable meeting location. We very much welcome input from the public. Because this is a virtual meeting, public comment will be handled as follows. Email to btconnect@bernardsboe.com or text to 908-292-3047. Use public comment as the email subject or the start of the text message. Indicate your first and last name and address. This is required for your public comment to be included in the record. Please keep your comments to a maximum of approximately 3 minutes if read aloud. Note that individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment per each section on the agenda, the agenda items and the non-agenda items. And again, I remind anyone sending in public comments, please include your name and your first and last name and your address. With that, I think we're up to our next item. Is Juliet here? Hi, Juliet, the student representative report. Welcome.
Hi, great. Thank you so much for having me. So quick rundown, this past week at Ridge, we actually had a Ridge Spirit Week, which was sort of a nice event for people both virtually and in person to try to, foster a little sense of community. So some of the things we had were we had students bring their pets to virtual school, which was a really nice experience because even though we're all on Zoom, we got to enjoy, a furry little friend with us. And then also, of course, there's like the classic Ridge wear. So we had a lot of fun with that and we documented the experience online. So there's a lot of posts and stuff. We're really trying to make us really feel like a united school, even if, some of us are all in different places. Unfortunately, though, we did have homecoming rescheduled. However, we are looking forward to having it whenever we can. Back in the classroom, people are pretty much settling into this new normal as much as they can. Teachers are really improving on the front of having both virtual and in-person students. A lot of the technological issues have been worked out. Having some of those microphones that can pick up from all directions has really helped. But of course, there are still some issues and we'll continue to look at them going forward. Lastly, there is some concern from students about how absences are being run. So if a student is in person and they are maybe feeling unwell, whether it'd be possible to switch to virtual classes for the day or if that would count as an absence, because some people are worried that might discourage people from, taking an absence if they're feeling unwell, and it might encourage them to push through and go to school, which obviously none of us want to see. But yeah, that's about all. Pretty much just transitioning into this new process and trying to settle in as much as we can.
Thank you, Juliet. Do any board members have questions for Juliet? Well, Juliet, we appreciate you joining us. You're welcome to stay. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Markarian is raising his hand.
I just wanted to make sure that Juliet knew. We really, and I could talk to Dr. Lazovic about this, but we did try to make it possible for students that are scheduled to be in person for a particular day to go into the absence reporting form on Genesis and indicate that they wouldn't be in school that day, but they would be participating virtually. So that's actually on the absence reporting form. And we need to know whether students are going to be in school or not when they're scheduled to be in school. We need to account for where everyone is and make sure that they are located where they're supposed to be located. So we do need to track whether a student is absent from the building on the day that they were scheduled to be in person, just for accountability purposes. But if a student, as you described, isn't able to be in that day, but they're feeling well enough to work remotely, that is possible to do, as long as the students are making themselves visible in this format at the beginning of each period. Since the teachers are taking by-period attendance, students can still earn credit that way. So we did that for the very reason that you just described. We don't want kids who are maybe feeling a little bit off on a given day to feel like they can't be home and do their classes virtually for that day.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you. I'll pass it
Okay.
along.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much, Juliet. As always, you're welcome to stay, but if you have homework or something else that you need to be doing, please don't feel compelled to stick around. Okay, and with that, we are up to the superintendent's report. Mr. Markarian.
Hi, thank you, Madam President. There's just one item on there. I know we have to do this item annually, so we do need to vote on this one particular item to submit our school nursing report. And as I do on an annual basis, I asked Mr. Syed to share out for the public and benefit of the board what this item is for.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Yeah, this is, as Mr. Markarian mentioned, it is an annual report. It gives a status of all of our nursing services within each of the buildings. It talks about the nursing supplies in each of the buildings. It talks about our nursing program and what we're able to offer in terms of services within those buildings, elementary, middle, and high school. And our nursing coordinator, Rita Zarabara, has helped us tremendously with this as a coordinator, working with the nurses in each building to ensure that the services and supplies, most importantly, are represented accurately in our submission to the state.
Thanks, Mr. Syed.
So I believe with that, we require a motion to approve the school nursing plan. Mrs. McCune and Mrs. Korn is our second. And Mr. McLaughlin, if we could have a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune.
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Markarian, was that everything for?
There was just one other item. I just wanted to report out to the board and for the public as well. We have been taking a look at some of the issues surrounding our current format with respect to having Board of Education meetings and looking at the possibility of trying to return to having some of these meetings begin to occur in person. We have passed some board policy of late that kind of helps us open up that possibility. And we're also taking a look at the local finance notice that I discussed previously and been working with our board attorney, Mr. Crute, who's here on the call with us tonight. And we are recognizing that that particular local finance notice is kind of in a review stage that's going to be ongoing. for the time being. So we're looking forward to kind of letting that issue settle out and get those regulations clarified before we make too many more formal recommendations for the board in terms of how they may proceed. We're also monitoring the capacity limit issue with respect to how many persons may be allowed to attend a meeting in person, and obviously the general health conditions overall. So for the time being, my suggestion is that we focus on improving the format of our current Zoom meetings, our Zoom Board of Education meetings, in particular, and consistent with the local finance notice regulations that we're working through. We want to add a component whereby members of the public, when they are making public comment, they actually would enter into the Zoom meeting, expanding our Hollywood squares by one for the person that is actually making the public comment. So what would happen is we'd have a format that looks very close to the one that we have right now. When we get to the public comment sessions, folks would singularly, meaning one person at a time, come into the meeting, make their public comment, exit the meeting. The next person comes in, makes their public comment and exits. The next person makes their public comment and exits, and so on and so forth until we get through all of the folks that want to enter the meeting to make a public comment. I think that would be a nice enhancement. We would get the opportunity to see the folks that are making the public comment, which obviously brings us a little bit closer to normalcy, where in person, we always get to see who's coming to the meetings and making public comments. So I think that would be a step in the right direction and something that we can work on going forward. I've already met with our Director of IT, Mr. Blinder, to try to figure out how we can set that up properly with Zoom, and we'll be doing some testing of that going forward so that we can make sure that that will work smoothly. In the meantime, for those folks that could not make public comment that way, perhaps because there's a technology issue or otherwise, we would still be able to take their public comment in the same manner that we have been so far. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Martini. The next item is public comment on agenda items. Ms. Fox, do we have any comments on agenda items?
Yes, we have one. Barbara Geary, Dryden Road. I was surprised to be informed on Friday that MAP testing would be this week, and confused to learn that the hybrid students would be taking it in person. For weeks, we were told that hybrid students could not have live streaming on home days, and it will be compensated for with the small group instruction when in school. Our hybrid students are losing valuable time with teachers to take the test that could have been taken at home. The virtual students are taking it at home. Can you explain the reasoning behind this decision? Can you also explain the reason behind the decision to only take the math portion? Many other districts have moved away from taking the MAP testing and are utilizing Linkit. Has this been considered in our district? Extra specials in the elementary schools are not an efficient or effective use of time. I was told it would be curriculum related. I do not see a benefit to my daughter playing 20 questions on a Zoom call. Can extra specials be replaced with time for extra help with math, reading, writing, or a class discussion on social studies or science? Thank you for starting a pilot program for the hybrid students to have more opportunities for live instructions on their home days. Are there any pilot programs and reevaluations occurring for the virtual program? Have barriers been installed in any classroom? If we install barriers around desks, would we be able to have more students in the classrooms? Many surrounding districts are moving to phase 2 of their hybrid plan. When will phase 2 be established in our district? We are a month behind all the districts that opened their buildings on time in September. And we just got one more. Elaine Daddario, 46 Dykeman Place. Dear Board of Education and administrative staff, I'm writing to express my concerns with a policy for COVID-19 return to school medical clearance form put in place in district. Our district has had 2 sports teams for RHS play outside games where players were considered contacts of positive cases. In each case, the contacts were all found to be negative for COVID following any potential contact or possible COVID exposure. I get that there is a 14-day quarantine for contacts as a precaution and district policy, but it is unnecessary and inappropriate to require a COVID return to school medical clearance form be completed by a physician, whereas it requires families to pay at their own cost for a doctor's appointment to have their student looked at with a doctor's eyes, which has never been a way to determine anything about COVID-19. Looking at a person in a physical is never going to tell you if they have COVID or not, especially when you are asking families to pay out of pocket to see a doctor. That is, if you can get an appointment for students who have been tested twice and proven negative so that they have never had COVID to begin with. It's absurd. Think about it. If RHS students are tested twice and are negative and proven never to have had COVID, they should be able to return to school without quarantine, without a release form and physical. If RHS students are quarantined for 14 days, they should return to school like college students throughout the state and country without having to pay for a release form and physical. If RHS students are quarantined, doctors will not see them for COVID-19 physicals. If RHS students are not required to test but are required to quarantine and complete a return to school medical clearance, the district has it backwards, as only tests and quarantine are tools used to figure out if someone will end up COVID positive. Two types of testing can be done, rapid and PCR. RHS doesn't require either test if you are a contact, but does mandate and require you pay for a doctor to give you a physical before someone is allowed to return to school. I'm shaking my head on this one as it doesn't add up and needs to be rethought out. If RHS students are never positive for COVID, then the return to school medical clearance is a moot point. District families should not be forced to pay for a doctor's appointment for a physical to determine if they can return to school if they never had COVID-19 in the first place. This district and its administrators have gotten form happy, but this is not legal or scientific and should not continue. The information sent to families of contacts says that COVID testing is not mandatory, but physical clearance is. What? Backwards, especially when the clearance form asks the doctor to sign off on the COVID diagnostic test, but not a scientific test, which is the only way to know if someone is positive for COVID. Doesn't make sense. Our district doctor, in conjunction with the health department, are said to be behind this form. This was not thought out and has no real basis in our district and needs to be removed ASAP. I was informed that in August, when the one football RHS student tested positive, these same concerns were expressed by football families too, and since forgotten. What I question here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we
that time.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it right now.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Markarian, is there anything you would like to address at this time? Oh, Mr. Markarian, you're muted.
How about now?
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry. So I'll take the second one. Maybe Ms. Fox wants to jump in on the first one a little bit. The second question with respect to the procedures being used in order for students who were identified as close contacts, or really for students that need to receive a medical clearance before returning to school after something's been recognized that may be a potential problem. I'll be happy to take a look at that and revisit that with Ms. Zarabera, as well as a district physician. I'll talk to him about that as well. My understanding is that we developed that policy in the first place, working with the district physician, the health department, and also looking at CDC guidelines in terms of how long students would need to be out of school before they could return to school. But no problem, we could take another look at that and take a look at whether or not testing should have a role to play in the decision or not. And then, I don't know, Ms. Fox, if you want to jump in at all about I guess really the question with respect to MAP testing. I know that, you know, I can share Linkit. We know that Linkit is not a actual test. It's a data warehouse system.
They do have an assessment component. That's like the third level of what you can take on with them. That's not dissimilar from MAP testing. So.
Okay, Thank you.
Yeah, I can explain. There's a lot of questions. So the first thing was that I did send a letter 2 weeks ago notifying of state testing and annual testing, and MAP was included on that to begin this week. So the letter that went out Friday was a reminder of that. That's one thing. In the question about the time of day, or I'm sorry, hybrid students taking it in school and virtual taking it at home. So first and foremost, MAP testing in the fall and in the winter is given as a diagnostic assessment. It's not tied to any placement decisions that we make. It is informational for the teacher to gather, important formative information about where students' skill gaps are, where their strengths are, and so they can use it towards decision-making instructionally. We do intend to, so when all of the students take the test, we're looking for them to just do their best so we know where they are. We understand the difference between in-school and virtual, bless you.
Sorry.
But it is a limitation we're dealing with, and so we felt this was the best approach at this time. The students in school will be taking the test K-5 during the morning meeting time, so not during instruction, reading, writing, or math instruction. The students at William Annan will be taking the test during advisory period, so again, not during instructional time. In the winter, we intend to test both reading and MAP again. So the reason we decided at the grades 3 through 5 to only give the MAP assessment is because we felt that our local sort of in-house diagnostic assessments in reading and writing would garner us better information that is actionable at this time. In other words, would help us with students in the more immediate skill-based individual level, and that we would then look to test again in the winter, which would be in February, to put those two things together. So that was kind of the decision we made to just make the most of our time and use the assessments we felt would give us the best information. I think I answered most of them.
Thanks.
There were a few other questions in the email.
Yeah, there was a question about barriers around desks and whether or not that would allow you to, I think the question was, bring more students in.
Yes.
And all I can say with respect to that is that in the road back document, it does talk about the ability to space students 6 feet apart. And if you can't, it suggests that you turn desks in the same direction and make use of barriers. So we did purchase barriers for the schools to use appropriately in classrooms where maybe they thought they couldn't get the kids far enough apart. So every school was given some kind of U-shaped barriers that could be put on desks or tables to separate students. And where we are using desks that can face in the same direction, they are facing in the same direction. The other question I think was about extra specials. And right now, I don't think there's any pilot plan to replace extra specials with other instructions, although we have had some conversation about that, how time is being used in general, trying to figure out what is the best way to utilize all of the time that we have to teach the students, given how stretched we are for time in general.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. So the final item is the approval of minutes. Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
I think we need a motion first.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Mrs. White and Mr. Salmon. Now a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. So with that, we are up to Finance Committee report. It looks like we have 33 items. And do we have a report, Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can we just get a motion in a second and then hear Mr. Salmon's report? Ms. Schaefer and Mrs. Richmond, please.
So Finance met on Wednesday, October 14th. The first item up for discussion was an Aramark Facilities Services contract update, and we were joined by Scott Beer, who's an SVP at Aramark, and Bill Ejector, the president of Advocate, our district food service and facilities consultant. So the first item was facilities, custodial staff. The district contract with Aramark calls for 41.5 custodians, 41 full-time and 1 half position. For the past several months, Aramark has only supplied 37.5, and Mr. McLaughlin has been continuously pressing for additional staff. Scott Beer, the SVP at Aramark, said that as of October 14th, the district will have 40.5 custodians with an additional custodian starting on October 15th. Mr. Beer also stated that Aramark has an additional 4 candidates in the hiring process that should be cleared to start in the district by the end of the month. Mr. Beer believes that a new sign-on bonus and the Aramark benefits package have contributed to the new influx of candidates. The 4 additional candidates would be permanently brought into the district and paid for by Aramark. Mr. Beer also stated that he would continually look to source new custodians and facilities personnel to the district, given the large amount of turnover we've seen. The committee asked about a potential personnel shortfall if any of the Aramark personnel have to quarantine. Mr. Beer explained that Aramark has in the past used a temp service to fill such gaps in coverage. However, the temp service has been unreliable, and Mr. Beer would like Aramark to keep sourcing its own candidates. The committee did ask Mr. Beer about turnover within Aramark and oversight. Mr. Beer is bringing a new VP in to oversee the relationship with the district and said in any event that any and all issues can be brought directly to him. The district's facilities contract is due to be rebid in the spring of 2021. We also talked about Aramark food service. There was an issue discussed related to an overdue payment that Aramark recently made to the district. We also talked about the sourcing of free and reduced school lunch, which the district will be purchasing from the Bridgewater district and bringing in for distribution to free and reduced price lunch students. By doing this, we will be furloughing our Aramark food service staff. And when the district plans to resume full-time food service, Mr. Ejector said we would need to give Aramark about 30 days prior notice to bring back personnel, order supplies, and prep kitchen and production spaces. Mr. Markarian asked about the status of the remote ordering app that Aramark was supposed to be developing. Mr. Ejector said that Aramark has the app in development and it's ready to go. It would just need to be customized for the district in that 30-day prior notice period. The second item up for discussion was a busing update provided by Janet Lubsach, who is the district transportation coordinator, and Mr. Jerry Ford, who is the Del Val Regional High School transportation coordinator. They touched on several issues. The start of school went well while dealing with normal school opening issues like stops, routes, mileage calculations, etc. Mr. Ford and Mrs. Lubsach adjusted bus route times and reissued bus passes to rectify the timing issues. Mr. Ford explained that some 54 passenger buses used to transport Ridge High School and elementary students on their second run were replaced with 24 passenger buses, and 2 routes, one for Ridge High School and one for WAMS, were eliminated, saving approximately $140,000. Mr. Ford said it may be possible to eliminate additional routes at Ridge by consolidating routes in 2020, 21, 22. Ms. Lubsach said there is a good working relationship with personnel at Barker, Bus, and Kensington, the new district riders. Mr. Ford said they are trying to limit 24 passenger buses to 10 riders, 1 in each seat, but some buses may have additional riders when seat sharing is occurring with aides or nurses or siblings that can share the same seat. Mr. Ford is currently working on the annual New Jersey District report of transported students required by the DOE, and after that is complete, he will be working on the integration of TransFinder and Genesis, which TransFinder said is possible. The contracts with Barker and Kensington have been fully executed and now are signed by the county office, and Somerset County Ed Services Commission is still responsible for our out-of-district special education routes and after-school activity transportations. The third item was an update on the hygiene project installation in the district provided by John Perrin, who's the new Assistant Director of Facilities in the district. As previously reported, our Aramark staff undercounted the number of bathrooms in the district that required the upgraded faucet, soap, and paper towel dispensers. After a recount, Mr. Perrin oversaw Aramark staff and outside plumbers to install the remaining items: 72 automatic soap dispensers, 63 hands-free faucets, and 110 automatic paper towel dispensers. Any overtime that Aramark staff charge will be paid by Aramark, and the district costs for the outside plumber can be charged back to the CARES Act funds. As of October 14th, Mr. Perrin confirmed that all outstanding installations have been completed at all elementary schools and WAMs. Mr. Perrin was informed by Aramark and the plumber that Ridge High School is also complete, but he will do a visual inspection to confirm, which was to happen this week. The next item was the WAM Science Lab project update provided by Tony Quintana at Spiesel Architects and Mr. Perrin. Mr. Perrin had received the abatement specification for floor tile and glued furniture from RJB Associates. Mr. Quintana is incorporating the abatement specification into the final bid package. Mr. McLaughlin is working with outside counsel to add criminal history background checks and daily health screening requirements to the bid package. We will go out for quotes around the middle of November and award the contract before the end of the year, with the project to be started and completed after school closes in June. Due to the immediate health and safety nature of the issue and the necessity to proceed in an expedient fashion, the JDOE has authorized the use of emergency procurement procedures. The next item was a discussion of the Ridge High School sanitary line replacement project provided by Mr. Quintana at Spiesel. The first subpart was excavation in the alleyway behind the new gym from November 3rd through 8th. A ground penetrating radar survey in that alleyway was completed. A civil engineering firm is completing survey work for elevations. The current plan is to do the excavation work in that space from November 3rd, which is election day, where everybody will be virtual for school, through the 8th. So that runs through Teachers Convention. Generally, no students or staff will be in the building during that time, but on November 4th, we will keep the 700 wing and the D parking lot open for special education students who are in school on Wednesdays. Also, some sports may have to be rerouted to accommodate the construction area. There is the issue of the football game that is scheduled for the Friday night, November 6th. That is currently under discussion about what to do about that. The second part was potential replacement of the kitchen ejector pump. Currently, there's an ejector pump in the kitchen that moves refuse through sanitary lines there. Mr. Quintana is exploring whether the new sanitary lines can be laid deep enough to accommodate sanitary outflow from the kitchen to possibly replace the ejector pump. During the sanitary line project with the 300 and 400 wing bathrooms offline, Mr. McLaughlin corresponded with the township, which has authorized school to continue even while the 300 and 400 wing bathrooms are offline. The existing usable facilities are sufficient for the current students and staff and would also be sufficient for a full return of students and staff. There was a portion, previously reported there was a portion of the sanitary line that went under the wood shop that was incapable of being imaged, but Mr. Perrin found a clean out for the line and imaging confirmed that that sanitary line is intact. So the services in the wood shop sink and a locker room bathroom adjacent to that are usable. The next item up was the state aid and extraordinary aid update. The reduction in state aid of $430,000 was confirmed in the state's budget. The reduction was addressed through a fund balance appropriation done by the board after cuts were announced. So there's no change in the appropriation level of any programs or services. The state budget fully funded extraordinary aid and the district received a bit more than expected. The district fund balance was around, as of June 30th, was around 11.5 million. The anticipated state aid cut was around $431,000. The district budgeted amount from this balance for 2021 is $3 million, and $3 million was set aside for the 21-22 school year. The district set aside the maximum 2% allowance of the general fund balance for emergency situations. The Ridge High School sanitary line project is expected to cost about $800,000. We have to implement mid-year the new state health benefit program that's expected to cost as much as $500,000. And we are expected to have about $1.8 million to apply to the fund balance for 21-22 school year. This will potentially be needed for the health benefits cost increase driven in significant part by the newly mandated state health benefit program. This amount is basically equal to the amount of additional extraordinary aid we had received. The last item discussed was the Ridge High School cafeteria construction project. Given the current state of schools, the planned construction already going on and about to proceed in the district, and the uncertainty about school going forward in terms of how many kids will be in the building at a given time, the cafeteria project is put on hold for now. In terms of the items that are on the agenda, number 1 is a standing item. Number 2 is to revise previous financial reports to reflect the confirmed extraordinary aid numbers. Number 3 is a standing item. Number 4 is professional development. 5 through 11 are home services for students. 12 and 13 are student evaluations. 14 through 18 are out-of-district placements. 19 through 26 are student services. 27 and 28 are out-of-district placements. 29 is approval of a carryover on unused IDEA monies. 30 is approves an additional payment to John Perrin for work done over the summer while he was a consultant to the district. 31 renews the order for 1 bus for Passaic Valley Coach Lines for the Ridge Ski Team. Number 32 approves a parental transportation contract, and there is an addendum that is getting that right now. The award of an emergency contract without bidding for the sanitary line replacement project at Ridge High School. That's it.
Questions, anyone? Okay, Ms. Wiltridge.
Yeah, I just had a question about the smaller buses, you know, switching to a smaller bus. Is that a permanent change, or is that because we're on the hybrid schedule and we have fewer students riding as a result?
It was a change predicated on the ridership and the routes this year
Okay.
pre-COVID. So that could change from, right, so that could change from year to year because they did the routing assuming that all students were going to be on the buses for given routes.
Okay.
And so they were just looking at the level of ridership, and it could change again next year.
Okay, but it will be consistent this year no matter what happens.
But yes, and unless all of a sudden we have an influx of students back, because we did have some decrease overall in our enrollment. And we had a significant number of students that are normally subscription riders that right now aren't doing that. But that was not the reason. They did not have all that information at the time they did the routing. They just looked at the number of students on given routes the way they had them structured and said, no, we can use a smaller bus. We don't need to have a 54-passenger bus.
Okay, thanks.
I saw other hands. Whose hand did I see a moment ago? Oh, Lauren, yes. Sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute my thing. This is regarding the sanitary line and closing off the area behind the gym November 3rd through 8th. So the football game. So we've already lost our homecoming game this past Friday and had to reschedule things because the other team had COVID. And this is our only home game now. So I just want to make sure that that you're talking with Coach West and the Touchdown Club. And I'm sure Juliet and the Ridge High School kids will want that game to be a home game. And I was hoping maybe we could just have the parking lot closed, maybe, if that's what, and then change the entrance. So we've got the senior lot and we've got Cedar Hill so that we could still have the game at home.
Nick, the reason theoretically the digging is done by the time we get to Friday night, theoretically.
Yeah.
They're not doing any digging.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's obviously we'd like to be able to have the game at home. I think we should probably have a little conversation with Rich, Rod, and then we can get back to the board on this. My concern is that if there's any kind of issue that happens at the beginning part of the week, maybe something is extending into Friday night, and we are under a really tight schedule between Tuesday through Sunday, trying to have that area closed back up and have that work in a safe place by Monday morning. And so, Ms. Beckman, I did say to Mr. Scello you know, in light of the fact that there are never any guarantees when, you know, you start digging holes around utilities, I encouraged him to look for an alternative, because I'm very concerned that, you know, things don't go perfectly, and they sometimes don't with digging and projects. And then we have a mess in that area, and a lot of people and students around the building, especially when you have the trainer's office, as you probably know, right there at that back entrance. You've got the trainer's office and Mr. Shello's office, which is a high traffic area. Anytime you have anything athletic going on, it can represent a potential for significant problems if that digging needs to continue. And we may even have some utilities off. If I'm not mistaken, we talked about the need to have electrical shut off while some of this project is occurring. And given that this is coming up pretty quickly and we can't predict whether or not it's going to go smoothly, you know, we could be in a situation where the power is off and they're in the middle of something and we can't turn the power back on. Then there's no lights on the field. So I did encourage Mr. Shello to find out if it was possible to play that game at the other school's location. So I can follow up with him, but just to let you know, those are my concerns, knowing that sometimes things just don't go well. Is it worth it to risk that? We can't really tell these guys don't work, because we need to get that area done by Monday so we can have the school reopened.
If I could just be clear about one thing, they're not going to have that closed up by Monday. That's never been possible.
No, but I mean, in a safe place, right?
I mean,
So
they will be done with the digging, but if they have 100 feet of pipe at least to lay, and then they have to backfill. So they'll probably be working into the next week. But the reason for doing that, just to be clear to the committee, for doing the dig was in case they struck anything that we didn't, for some reason, with all of the testing we've done, GPR, and we've done site evaluations with site engineers, but God forbid they still hit something. We've seen this happen even when we have things marked out. We would not have anybody in the building at the time. But once we get past that, they're going to be working into the next week to complete laying all of the pipe that goes in. It's not a small project when you're talking over 100 feet of sewer line that has to be tied back in, and this is all new service, and then backfill it.
Right. I'm just talking about getting through the safety issue that we're closing things off to begin with.
No, I understand. I just wanted to be clear, though, that I don't want people to have the expectation that, you know, come back on Monday and everything's filled in and it was as if nothing ever happened.
Right. Yeah.
Ms. Korn?
Is it possible, I don't know if this is, I'm afraid to say it, is Mountain Park a possibility since it's in town, and are we able to, if we can't use our facility, are we able to use theirs if it's not being used? I don't even know if that's a, like.
I don't know that that's a viable location for a football game at Mountain Park, but.
Yeah, they have football there.
Yeah, but, you know.
There's no stands though, Jen, you know, those little piddly things.
Yeah, but, you know, I was just throwing it out there if they want to have kind of a home thing. I don't know if that's even, I don't even know if we're allowed to do that, but I just was wondering.
Well, you know what? Why don't you, you know, like I said, let me talk to Rod about it a little bit with Rich. For the reasons that I cited, my recommendation is to know that there is a different plan. I would hate for us to be in the middle of something and, you know, like I said, power could be off. You know, we can't make any promises that things are going to go perfectly well and smoothly when you've got a very small window of time that you're trying to take care of a utility situation. If it doesn't go just right, we could have a problem. And that's, you know, that's the risk that we take when we try to get things done, you know, in the middle of the school year, and for very good reason, right? We're trying to take care of a sanitary line situation and get that resolved so that the building is back to the way it should be with respect to all of its facilities. So it's important for us to do this at the earliest possible date. We're trying to take care of this exterior digging before, you know, colder and more winter-like weather sets in. And that's the rationale for trying to get this taken care of. And I hesitate to schedule something that could conflict with that and put us in a situation where potentially we've got problems going into the following week because we said to people, well, we need to stop work for today because, you know, we've got other things going on. We need to have students nearby. So it's, as I said, I think the safest course of action is to plan an alternative location for the game. That's what I asked Rich to take a look at.
Any other questions for Tim, or are we ready to vote? Okay, Mr. McLaughlin, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Beckman? Sorry, you were muted.
Oh, sorry.
You're muted now.
No to item 6, sorry. Or for item 5, the sanitary lines.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, so I didn't hear yes on everything except number 5. Is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. The next item is the Personnel Committee report. We have 18 items. If I could please have a motion in a second. Mrs. Korn and Mrs. White. The Personnel Committee met on Friday, and despite my best efforts, I did not complete the minutes. I'm sorry, everybody. I will report them out next time, but we do have these 18 items, so unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to ask Mr. McLaughlin for a roll call.
Ms. Beckman?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yeah.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. With that, we are on to the Policy Committee report. Mrs. Korn?
Okay, here we go. Buckle your seatbelts, it's policy time. All right, so we met on October 12th, and these are our policies we discussed. Policy 5350 is pupil suicide prevention. And so they add some language to the policy and regulations stating that, can you hear me? Yeah. When a student is required to obtain medical or psychiatric services, they may be seen at a community mental health screening center or a licensed medical professional, or they could see a licensed medical professional. And the medical clearance to return to school from a community mental health screening center will be accepted by the district. Policy 1648 is the Restart and Recovery Plan. That it was just revised to include the mandate that masks must be worn at all times in the schools and on the school buses, which weren't included in the original plan. Policy 1648.02 is remote learning options for families. And this also just adds some stuff that memorialized the process for signing up for remote learning. All students are eligible. There must be a request in writing within 3 weeks, with 3 weeks notice, but no later than the start of a new marking period or trimester. It allows people to move between remote and in-person, following the above parameters, and we are already following these guidelines within our working policy. It was just added after. And then policy 1648.03, which is also part of the Restart and Recovery Plan, full-time remote instruction, just memorializes the governor's executive order 175, which was implemented on August 13th, 2020, letting schools stay remote if they are not ready or able to open for in-person learning. Policy 1620, which is administrative employment contracts, just states that the board rescinds any existing administrative employment contracts before they've expired and negotiates a new contract. There must be a public notice and hearing for the new contract. Policy 2431 and regulation 2431.1 is athletic competition and emergency procedures for sports and other athletic activity, and this was revised. It just aligns with the administrative code. The regulation includes emergency procedures that must be included in the district's emergency action plan and procedures. Mr. Shello and Ms. Zarabara will make sure our existing plan includes all the procedures outlined in the revised policy and regulation. One update was a readmission to athletic activities after a serious or life-threatening injury. The parents will receive written notice upon review by the district's health personnel of the medical clearance submitted as to whether the student can resume athletic participation. So just included the written notice to the parents. Policy 2464 is gifted and talented students. And this was revised. It's a new law, describes accessibility requirements, reporting requirements, and complaint procedure requirements relative to gifted and talented programs. The policy just updates just reflect the law changes. And Ms. Fox recently completed the new annual reporting requirement. Policy 5330.05 and the regulation is a seizure action plan, which is new. The new policy is related to a recently passed PAWS law. Students with a history of seizures must have an emergency healthcare plan and an individualized healthcare plan. With the parents' permission, all staff must be notified of the student's history of seizures, including bus drivers, and all staff must be trained on how to treat students with seizures. The district implemented these procedures last winter. Policy 6440, which is cooperative purchasing. This was a statutory change updating the definitions of a lead agency, registered members, cooperative purchasing system, and joint purchasing system. Essentially, the policy describes taking advantage of a contract negotiated by a lead agency in the cooperative purchasing group to take advantage of prices of pricing for goods and services. Policy and regulation 6470.01 is electronic funds transfer and claimant certification. This is new. It includes procedural safeguards and controls when using any electronic fund transfers of funds in order to pay vendors. Mr. Markarian is working with Mr. McLaughlin, the district auditor, and the district treasurer to implement the necessary procedures. And then there's policy and regulation 7440, which is school district security. It was revised. There's a new law that requires an annual safety audit for each school in the district using a checklist from the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. Hank Werner, our Director of School Safety and Security, will ensure the necessary audits are completed. Policy 7450, which is property inventory, which was revised. The policy clarifies what is considered equipment versus supply for property recording purposes in accordance with the new 2020-2021 Uniform Minimum Chart of Accounts for New Jersey Public Schools and approved private schools for students with disabilities. Good Lord. Supplies that get used up each year do not need to be inventoried. Equipment is typically a single item that is worth $2,000 and above, that maintains its identity on its own, is non-expendable, and normally lasts for at least 1 year. Policy 7510 and regulation 7510, which is use of school facilities, which was revised. The new law that requires an edited version and is edited to remove any sensitive information of school safety and security plans to be given to the supervisor of any non-school district sponsored youth program organization using the school facilities. A modified version of the emergency response crisis flip chart can be used for this purpose so that the supervisors can train their staff on basic security, evacuation, and emergency response protocols. And then policy 8420 is the emergency and crisis situations, which was revised. All substitute employees must be trained on the school district's practices and procedures on school safety and security. So you would provide all employees, including substitutes, a copy of the emergency response crisis flip chart. And that's everything, if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Jen? Mr. Crute, did you want to say something?
Well, I think we still need a motion on this one.
Oh, yes. So could we have a motion in a second, please? Mr. Salmon and Mrs. White. And were there any questions? Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yep.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Before we move on to the next item, I'd just like to send a reminder out to the public. I have been informed by Ms. Fox that we have some public comment that has come in without an address. They cannot be read into the record unless your address is included with the public comment. So please either resubmit your comment or your name and your address, and we can connect them for any of the comments that have come in who did not include it since the reading of the last two public comments. Thank you, everyone. With that, we are on to the Curriculum Committee report. Mrs. Richmond?
I'm still working on the minutes from the last meeting, but I will have them out to everybody and report them out at the next board meeting, which is before the next curriculum meeting. So.
Thank you. And then our next item is the Wellness Committee report. Mrs.
Wellness is meeting this week on Thursday, and I will report out at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. White. And then we are up to Liaison Committee reports. Does anyone have anything? Okay. Nothing on Liaison Committee reports, which brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. Ms. Fox?
I'm sorry, there was one and now I don't see it. Hold on. There it is. Okay. So Lori Albee, 96 Alder Lane, Basking Ridge. No, we can't move our last home football game. We can park in Senior Lot or Cedar Hill. We can't move the game. So one was sent back in and it says added address, but I do not see the added address anywhere in the email. Todd Edelstein, Riverside Drive. Why hasn't the bushes been trimmed back on the sidewalk side of the main entrance of Ridge High? The school has been open for the students for a month now and the bushes are so overgrown. The kids have to walk on the grass in areas. Otherwise, the kids get either scratched up by the branches or soaking wet when the bushes are wet from rain. Of course, I noticed the bushes in front of Ridge are trimmed and the grass is cut. I called several times last week, but it seems no one wants to address this or answer their phone, not the facilities manager nor the superintendent. It is sad that I have to address a BOE meeting for something like this. That's it.
Okay. Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Markarian, is there anything that you would like?
Sure. So, I just want to revisit the issue of the football game. Look, obviously we would like to have the home football game if we can. And I will work on it with Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Shello. I just don't want to put us in a situation where we get stuck in the middle of a project. At this stage of the game, we don't, no pun intended, sorry. At this stage, we're not even certain that we're going to have a contractor to definitely do that work in November, but it is our goal to make it happen during that week, because it does give us the opportunity to have a stretch of 6 days where we think we can get it taken care of. So we are hopeful to get it done then, before we get, as I said earlier, the bad winter weather starting to set in and the colder ground temperature. So I will report out on that issue again. I promise you, I'll keep you updated on it as we find out our availability to get contractors in and do that job. And I will see if it is possible, even if we have a contractor. But as I said, I did tell Mr. Shello, explore and find out if you can do the game away. Because I just don't want us to have a problem where, we're in direct conflict and something has to give and we haven't planned for the possibility. So, please understand that we'll try. I just don't want to put us in a losing situation there. As far as the shrubs are concerned, I actually did hear of that last week from one of the administrative assistants that took a message. I was told that there wasn't a phone number or name left with respect to the individual calling about it. However, Mr. McLaughlin and I did discuss it, and I know that he directed our facilities director to reach out to the property owner that would be responsible for those shrubs. We don't necessarily want to go in and start cutting someone else's shrubs up, even if it may well be that they are encroaching on the sidewalk, and we just want to make sure that we have a conversation with the property owner about how to get that resolved. I know that our director of facilities was over at the property today, actually trying to make contact with the property owner to have a discussion about the property and the shrubs. My understanding is that he was knocking on the door today, at least this morning, and did not get a response. And I know that Mr. McLaughlin asked him to continue to follow up this afternoon and again tomorrow morning until hopefully he's able to get in touch with the property owner and come up with a plan as to how this bush and shrubbery issue will get resolved. Certainly, we don't want the kids not being able to get by on the sidewalk because of the shrubs. So we are working on getting that taken care of. And that's all.
So Ms. Fox just shared with me that we did get the address or two that were missing. So, seeing as we're still in that section of the agenda, I think it's a good idea if we proceed with those comments.
Sure. Debbie Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane. If it's not too late for lunchtime, would it be possible to replace dividers with clear plastic? It is not possible to chat while eating with the solid separators currently in use. Lunchtime is thus silent and somewhat depressing, according to my daughter and her friends. And then one more, Betsy Riddiford, 25 Queenberry Way. Please do everything possible to give Ridge High at least one last home game. We need to have a homecoming game for our seniors. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. I think.
Okay, so sure. So I think with respect to, I'm guessing the comment about the lunch and the dividers is probably with respect to Ridge High School. They're not conducting traditional lunches right now. The cafeteria is not serving lunch. So I'm assuming that it's a reference to the dividers that are on the tables in the cafeteria, which are generally, the space is generally being used for study hall. And I think even when the students have lunch, they may be in the space. And I understand the question in terms of the barriers themselves. I think that the barriers that are in place there, if I recall correctly, and I can take a visit by there, but I believe they have a clear panel in them, but they are not 100% clear. So part of the divider has a clear panel and part of the divider does not. I have gone around Ridge several times since we started running classes there. I've never seen the cafeteria particularly crowded. It's been very, very sparse in the number of students in the space. So I think they should be able to position themselves in such a way that they can see one another in terms of any conversation that they are having, but we'll take a look at that. And the other one was with respect to the football game, which I already addressed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Markarian. So that brings us to board forum. Board members? Anybody? Mrs. Richmond.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we as a board are all registered for the virtual school boards that starts tomorrow. So it just is a little reminder in case you were forgetting. It crept up on me. I totally forgot.
I can ask Ms. Nicholson to send you guys a reminder email in the morning about how to log in and access things. If you need those instructions, I'll ask her to do that first thing.
Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Discussing. Are we talking about the
convention?
No. Yes.
New Jersey School Boards Convention.
Right, yeah, because that's gonna be riveting online. Woo! But I'm just, like, whatever. More Zoom. No, the kitchen renovation, we're gonna, no? That, we're not doing the kitchen, but we're still want to go ahead with the rotating drop schedule? Is that a thing?
Yes, that is a thing.
I just want to make sure.
It's a big thing. It's a really, really big thing.
Yeah, that's why I make sure we throw it out there.
Yes.
I'm forgetting to
Yes.
mention that because,
Absolutely. So we've been talking about that actually last week and this week. And yes, our plan for next year is to build a master schedule for Ridge that is the rotating drop schedule. Obviously, without the cafeteria renovation, that is going to present a less than ideal situation in what we wanted, right? Everything is a little bit less than ideal right now, unfortunately. But we know that the plan was to have a renovated cafeteria with modern equipment, expanded refrigeration and storage that would facilitate the ability to run a unit lunch in a way that was consistent with what unit lunches looked like pre-COVID. And we recognize that building a master schedule that calls for unit lunch without having the upgrades done to the cafeteria facility are going to make it less than what we're used to having when it comes to the level of production that comes out of the Ridge cafeteria, right? So we anticipate that we will have to supplement depending on how things go. It's real difficult to predict at this stage of the game, but we don't think that we want to hold back the progress of the master schedule change strictly because we won't have the food production in the ideal way that we wanted to have the food production. We want to ultimately get to that level, and we know that it's important that we do get through that renovation at some point in the near future because it does need to be renovated. The equipment does need to be dealt with. We do want to make those improvements. So we may have to kind of get through next year without having the ideal scenario that we wanted with a renovated kitchen space and the associated food production that we wanted to get out of it. So we'll have to come up with some ways to get through the year. Keep in mind that there will always have been planned some disruption to the food service production because we know that we're not going to be able to do that cafeteria over, or excuse me, that kitchen over in just the 2 months of the summer. So we had actually planned on giving up 3 months of production anyway to get that project started in the spring. So, it really comes down to deferring that and putting that off. But we're confident that we can come up with some ways to get through 1 year of less than ideal cafeteria production.
Did anyone else want to say anything? Ms. Schaefer?
Along with that line, are we still considering the shift in the time schedule? I know we can't test that this year because of the lack of traffic and whatever, but the later start time at the high school and middle school?
Right now, I would say that we're we'll have to think about it honestly. We haven't really been talking about that initiative just because everything has been 24/7 return to instruction and try to make the best of distance learning and hybrid programming and blended learning models, and focusing all of our attention on trying to give the teachers the skills necessary to do the best that they can with that, working on facilities and technology and everything else associated with it. We really haven't spent a lot of time on that conversation, so we'll have to revisit it. I wouldn't feel comfortable at this moment jumping in on that definitively one way or another, but I do want to say that we're committed to getting the rotating drop schedule done for Ridge High School next year. You know, how much we take on in terms of volume of change all at once, I think we need to have some more conversation about that.
I think the feedback that I'm hearing is that kids miss, if there was anything they missed from the spring, which is not much, it was the later start. And I think that the block schedule has been continued to be something that people have liked. So if we can try to incorporate both of them, it doesn't seem like the block is going to be that big of a lift since we're already kind of doing it right now. So it's not going to be as big of a change as it would have been in the past. And I just really encourage us to consider that time shift again.
Yeah, we just talked today a little bit about the fact that, you know, a lot of things that I think we were working on. I mean, just look at the cafeteria, another example of things that are, you know, disrupted, at least temporarily derailed as we've been doing crisis response essentially for 6 months. And we were just talking today about a desire to try to get back to refocusing on some of the things that we really liked that we were working on in a very positive way, instead of running around with, you know, fire extinguishers and everything else, trying to keep the wheels turning here, right? So, you know, I agree. We want to get back to those conversations. We want to start working on those things. It's just really hard to do when, you know, kids are not in school the way you want them to be in school. And all of your energy is kind of being poured into figuring out how can we do better with this, because, you know, frankly, things like start times just sort of pale in comparison when, you know, right now, this isn't what we want at all. Never mind getting to what we want with better start times. So, you know, we are mindful of the things that we're working on. We haven't forgotten about them, but they're, you know, the balance of time available to forward those agenda items it's been severely hampered, and we just have to try to find some ways to get back to it a little bit.
Anyone else? I'd just like to add a thank you for the recommitment to this effort. It's been a lot of years that this has been a topic of conversation for a number of versions of this board, and I think all of us remain committed to it, and we're pleased. Shake your head no if I'm speaking out of turn. We're pleased to know that this is an effort that you know, is underway as we look toward next year. So thank you for that, everybody who's involved, and I know it's a big group. So does anyone have anything else for board forum? Okay, well then with that, we are up. Jen has one more thing.
So sorry. I'm going to apologize ahead of time for asking this question. But I've been getting asked the question myself. So I'm throwing it out there about, you know, Murphy's his newest executive order is that, you know, inside sports can happen. So I wasn't sure if we were going to relook at the policy, because we have a lot of rec teams that use our facilities for their sports, and they're all from town. So I don't know how that works, but I know it's a question that's going to be asked. So we might as well, you know, get ahead of it and think about it, because now he said you can do it. I know there are facilities, but I don't about outside people using it. I don't know if you can limit it to the town people only, or if you open it up, you have to open to everyone. So I'm just throwing it out there so that people know that we're thinking about it and it's there, because it's a question that's definitely, now that he said that, people are gonna be pushing to do things. So just so that it's something that we have on our minds, that's all. It's
I'm
not something that you have to,
confused by what he said, because he did say that, but then he said with appropriate social distancing, and he was.
Yeah, it was 25 people, but.
How do you, but I mean, you can't have teams that are in contact sports have social distancing.
Well, they do, that's, wrestling's wrestling, and he said he can wrestle, so I guess.
I know, it's more mud.
Although the rules are like 10 minutes of close contact, so I guess a wrestling match is only like 3 minutes, so I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because it's going to come up. So, I just wanted to make sure we're all aware.
I just want to make the point it's clear as mud.
Well, as per usual, but I don't want to get into that with anybody. I'll get in trouble.
Okay, so anybody else? Anything on anyone's mind? All right, well then we really are up to adjournment. So if we could have a motion in a second, Mrs. Korn and Mr. Salmon, and then all in favor. All hands are up, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you.